Hey, everybody, welcome to Called Up the Prospects podcast. It's episode 2. We are back, and I am joined, as always, by my illustrious co host and good pal, Cam Robinson. Cam, Elite Prospects, you know him from there. You are reading his work. He's got a lot of work that's been out lately. But, Cam, hey, episode 2, how we feeling about episode 1? I thought it went really well.
Feeling good, man. We're feeling great out here. I think it was a great success and something nice to build upon. And I'm celebrating with some festive decorations for us this week.
I'm glad. Yeah, you have a nice background. For those of you watching, you'll be able to see it if you're listening. I mean, the holiday spirit is alive and well in the Robinson household. And Cam, we always want our fans and our listeners and our people that are they're coming in. We want you to leave kind ratings and reviews. But I wanted to call one out specifically, and I did not prepare you for this. And I don't know if you've seen it. Maybe you have. However, we've been getting a lot of nice 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and also on Spotify.
Excellent.
Please continue to do that. But this one caught my eye from one of our Canadian listeners, and this one is new to me. Certainly wasn't getting these on Talking Hockey Sense. The this is hot. 3 fire emojis. Oh me, oh my, that Cam Robinson is one sexy beast. The show is good too. And that comes to us from Puck Bunny 1. So the
Wow.
apparent sex appeal of Called Up the Prospects podcast is bringing in the 5-star reviews. And I got to say, I was felt a little left out, but I also understand it. But yeah, I mean, so I guess thank you, Cam, for bringing the heat, and not just with the takes. So,
Jeez,
how I
3
mean, how does
fire
that make
emojis.
you feel? And also, was that your wife or somebody?
Well, I was about to say,
Who?
I better check my wife's burner here, hey? And if it wasn't her, I better not let her hear this because she might be looking for Puck Bunny 1 in the stands. We might have some birds throwing hands here too. But thank you, Puck Bunny 1. Yes, much appreciated.
Yeah. Well, we do thank you for listening, and we thank everybody that has delivered a 5-star rating review, and also for those that you have reached out on social media. We really appreciate hearing about it. Obviously, a new show. There's going to be things that go well. There are going to be things that we have to work on. But as we continue to work through this, it's always great to get your feedback. And the best way to do that is with a 5-star rating and a kind review, because then we'll just keep doing the things that you like us doing. So. But we've got a lot to get to today, Cam. There's a lot that obviously it's World Junior time. We've got a couple updates on that front. We're going to be talking NHL draft today. We're also going to be talking a little bit more about, some of the stuff that we talked about last week, the NCAA-CHL, also a little bit of OHL expansion kind of news and rumors percolating as well that we're going to get into. Also going to have our weekly AHL segment and a couple of our other special segments like Beyond Belief. And also, at the end of the show, we always like to end with one big question. And we'll talk a little bit about a pair of defensemen that were drafted not all that long ago, but aren't having the best season. So we will talk all about that. But we're going to start today because, it's been an interesting news week in terms of the NCAA and the CHL, and the obviously we know about the rule change. We talked about Gavin McKenna last week potentially being the most impressive recruit in the history of NCAA hockey, if in fact he does decide to go the NCAA route for his draft season. But obviously now there is a bit of a recruiting kind of war, not really a war, but just more of a recruiting race to secure the rights to more players. You talked a little bit about, one big name for this year's draft that is, potentially down the road on a college recruitment and commitment situation. So let's talk a little bit about that. And let's talk about Michael Misa and what you reported this week.
Yeah. So I was out of town coaching this last weekend, and I had someone reach out to me, and we were chatting, and I was in the room actually about to give the pregame speech, and dropped that little nugget that Boston University and Misa have a framework in place for what it would look like with the NIL money and how that would go down for him to go to Boston University next season. Now, and when I reported it, and I set Twitter on fire a little bit there too, and I got some pushback, I know, from Colby Colin. And that's okay. That's his alma mater, and he's tapped in there as well too. And when I say a framework is in place, he didn't sign a commitment letter, nothing's done. And I broached that at the end of the tweet, just saying that it'll be really interesting to see how these NCAA schools and how these agents and kids handle announcing these commitments, right? It's in my expectation, it's going to be at the end of their seasons because they're playing on an OHL team. These kids aren't in the USHL.
Yeah.
They're not, expected to go to college next year. And so when you come out and be like, I'm thrilled to announce my commitment to BU or BC or whoever, you can't really do that right now. It's you be kind of pulling the chute on your teammates that are expecting you to be there next year. Now, the guys in the room, I've heard from players in the room too. They're expecting a lot of these guys to leave next year, anyways,
Mm-hmm.
already. But the Michael Misa one is that the expectation is that they've moved down that path. It's a university family. My expectation is that Luke Misa would probably follow suit too. That it'd be a package deal that both brothers would be going if they do land at BU, that they'd be going and playing there next year together. Lots of interesting stuff to go along with it. The next day, I published that big article on Gavin McKenna, not reporting that
Mm-hmm.
he was signing with anyone. Obviously, we've had the discussions there that linked to Michigan, but just some of the roadblocks and some of the incentives that are out there for these players to do it. And again, speaking to someone like I would never run with these things. I would never put them out there unless I had like credible, locked in sources that would know and have an inside edge into this and have greenlit me to put it out into the public. And so for a player like McKenna, it's that, I've been told that they could expect that he could make up to $1 million in NIL money next year as a 17 turning 18-year-old playing college hockey, right? And so that was one of the things, is that like these international students working on student visas wouldn't be able to accrue that much NIL money like an American could, which is still true. But there are ways for them to get up to some pretty substantial monies. And it's just going to be so fascinating to see as some of these high-end players, whether they're draft eligible or draft plus one and haven't signed their NHL deals yet, moving down there. How's that going to work? Is it going to push players out of top six roles and the transfer portal is going to open up wide? Is that NIL money going to be moving around like we see in college football right now? There's 650 players in the transfer portal because they know if I transfer schools, the booster clubs and the NIL money, it's going to be there for me. They're going to try to recruit me. There's huge opportunities for these players to make some money and play in a strong league, get the college experience, get all that, first-rate world-class strength and conditioning equipment and personnel. It's going to be a really interesting kind of foundational shift for junior and college hockey right now. And to be kind of on the cutting edge of it as we see it, it's going to be great for the players. It's going to be really interesting for us working in the business too.
Yeah, this is obviously, there's so many moving parts, and I think in some ways it does change a little bit the way we do things, the way we think about things, and I think in the end it's also going to have to change the way that kind of the hockey culture exists as it does in the CHL presently, because as you mentioned, like for these players, it's a difficult situation to be in where there's a level of expectation that if you aren't going to the NHL, you're coming back to this team. And now with the college option available to them, it's not necessarily the case. And so with that in it, you're basically kind of getting over a hurdle of that the USHL has been over and the BCHL and all those leagues have been over for years, because the expectation was, yes, you are stepping into college, and that hasn't been the case in the CHL. So there's that as well. And we've seen the leagues have like celebrated the college commitments of their overage players, the guys that are going to be aging out. Will they still celebrate those of the
Mm-hmm.
players that are 17 years old going into college, going into college next year? Is it going to be as celebratory in that way? And I think, for the culture will change over time and it'll become part of the norm and different things like that. But the other thing that you mentioned about the Mises brothers potentially being a package, that's something that can exist presently in the CHL without some significant draft maneuvering or trades. And so when you go to college, there is a little bit of this freedom of choice and also this freedom to, hey, I can play with my brother here because there's no draft that kind of puts them in different, Luke has been at Brantford and now, Michael's in Saginaw, and that makes it alluring. And obviously you add both Mises to the table, all of a sudden you're talking about you probably already have your blue chip recruiting class just with those two guys alone. So there's a lot of really fascinating things that are going to happen there. And, I think that's the important thing, is that as of right now, a lot of these teams, and when it's, whether it's framework and different things, there's a lot of exploratory phase kind of things happening behind the scenes right now. And I think it will be some time before we see college commitments and other things of that nature kind of pop up, because there will be other things that kind of come to the forefront. But I'm excited to see exactly what all is going to happen and where things go in this. Obviously, I think that there's a place for college and the NCAA to both, or the CHL and the NCAA to both benefit from this. But one thing I did want to talk about, Cam, in this whole process is what we've also been seeing beneath the CHL NCAA, transition. It's the other junior leagues to CHL transition, and it has been fairly significant. It has been a very steady stream. I think the BCHL has lost upwards of 25 players, I believe, into CHL teams. Now the BCHL was operating outside of Hockey Canada, and as a result,
Mhm.
they don't have as much protection as USHL teams do as working under the USA Hockey umbrella. We've talked about it before. There is a little bit of remuneration that is supposed to happen when you take a player from a team in a different uh, governing body and move them to a CHL team. There have been a few of these movements that have been halted by some of these negotiations over the monetary compensation that's going towards the USHL teams. BCHL doesn't have that advantage right now. Also, they've had players, they don't have regionalized issues, nor does the USHL. So those players that were from Ontario are choosing to go back to Ontario, or choosing to go back to Quebec, or going to places that are closer to home. So that's one thing. But we did see last week. So Lev Katzen is a player from the USHL, goes to the OHL, and in his first 3 games, he had 8 points. He outscored his USHL season total in his first 3 games. And so you're like, so I'm just wondering, as we kind of get through this, what is the next step of that for you? I mean, like I'm seeing these players kind of moving between leagues, and now all of a sudden, yeah, you're leaving a lot of teams in the lurch here, and these are teams that, especially if you're in the BCHL, there's really no recourse for you to get compensated for those losses.
It is like panic, full on panic mode in the BCHL right now. And losing all those players, they're all your best players too, right? And for
Yeah.
years, forever, it's been, the BC has been propelled by these future college players, and it's been, hey, I want to go play college hockey. I'm probably not ready, I'm not going to be a pro right away, so go ahead and get an education. Maybe I do get to be a pro hockey player, but if I don't, I have this education to fall back on. I commit. I play junior A hockey. BCHL is a good league, especially if you're playing in a certain number of franchises there that dominate a little bit. The Penticton comes to mind, but now they're losing all their top players, and it's going to be, where's your recruiting power, right? Is if a player is good enough to go and play in the Western Hockey League and then transition to school right from there, there's no desire to play junior A. So junior A is going to become watered down, right? We're going to have to see a lot more junior B players coming up to play junior A to fill those spots. And the whole league is going to just get watered down and watered down. Whether or not that's, they're going to look at just shutting down franchises so that you spread your talent out to a fewer franchises so the quality overall can maintain at a certain level. But it is definitely kind of panic mode going on in the BC right now. And I don't foresee anything really stopping it, right? Like you said, they
Mhm.
don't have any real ability to be like, no, don't take these players, no, give us compensation back in return to take these players. They're just kind of stuck there, getting all their goodies popped out of their fingers, like we're taking candy from a baby here, the CHL, and it's,
Yeah.
there's no end in sight.
Right. And yeah, I mean, there's going to have to be something. There's obviously going to have to be a lot of things that are decided in boardrooms. There's going to be a lot of owners are going to have to swallow some pride. I've said before too, like, the people that are quickest to release the grudges that are preventing them from
Mm.
doing whatever, partnering with different people and doing all that stuff, will probably be the ones that find a way to survive what's happening here. But it is a situation where you're starting to see some of these top players move on to other places, and I do think in terms of what the BC, what the OJ, all these other teams that are in Canada that are potentially losing some players, and even the USHL, is trying to create that pyramid for this new development model that exists, where it's more teams involved, and you're just trying to figure out exactly, what's the best way to keep the most players in your league for the longest amount of time. And in some cases, it's going to say, let's take the best players when they're younger, allow them to develop, then they move on to the next thing. We might only have them for a year, maybe two, and then they move on to the next thing, and then
Hmm.
they move on to the next thing. There are more rungs to the ladder now than there have ever been for players, and so now we'll see exactly who gets to climb those. But we're seeing, even we saw a player from the North American League just jump to the Sioux Greyhounds as well. So even in when we're getting to the Tier 2 Junior A, you're starting to get to players. We're seeing players move from prep school to the
Hmm.
OHL this week as well, Mount St. Charles and St. Andrews College. And so it's everything is changing very rapidly. And basically it's all about being quick to adapt. But the other thing I wanted to talk about on this, there was a bit of a buzz in the junior hockey world. A picture circulated around the scouting community. It got to me, it got to other people, but the OHL had at least a couple of representatives in Muskegon, which is a USHL
Mm.
team, Muskegon Lumberjacks. They were playing the Youngstown Phantoms. They are the two teams that Jeff Merrick from the Nation Network had reported had applied, had at least had conversations with the OHL about being expansion options. The QMJHL has been very open about saying that they want to get back into the U.S. market. They used to have a team in Lewiston, Maine. We've heard Manchester, New Hampshire, Lewiston again as potential options for Eastern expansion. I think that the Q would also like to get closer to Mass, closer to the Boston area as well. And there's a lot of different things. Um, what's the latest maybe that you've seen or heard about this, and then also, I'll share a few other thoughts as well, because based on some of the things that I continue to learn about this process, it may not be as seamless and easy as maybe previously thought. So, just what is the kind of the temperature that you see, or temperature you're taking on this whole situation as it is right now, Cam?
Yeah, that was one of the first things we heard, and that's really wise of some of these OHL and these QMJHL clubs, leagues, to try to do, because as we're seeing these kids coming out of prep school, and especially the Q, is that they're so close to get some a club or two in and around Maine, in and around Massachusetts, that Boston area, because you're not convincing kids from Boston to go play in Rimouski, right? Like, that's just not going to happen.
Right.
But if you put a team near home, and you'd be like, okay, you can play here, and then you can go play at Boston College, you can go play at Northeastern or wherever you're committed to. That's going to be far more alluring, and you're going to be able to bring in more talent to supplement the talent that you are now exiting and then leaving you to go play in college. So it makes a ton of sense. But like you said, I don't think it's going to just be like a slam dunk that Muskegon and Youngstown are just going to slip in to the O. I think that there's going to be it's going to be a lot of work, a lot of negotiation, a lot of layers to make something like that happen.
Yeah, and I don't think that I don't think we won't see the WHL get involved in this as well. I think that
Mhm.
there's a couple of rumors out there, nothing that I feel comfortable reporting at this time, but I think that there's certainly movement there. But what I would say is the other factor is, because the CHL is governed under the Hockey Canada umbrella, it does make them beholden to the double IHF rules and different things, like we talk about the transfer agreement, different things like that. But there's also the fact that USA Hockey does get some say on who gets, what the CHL can put in the United States. Every team that is in there has had some level of clearance from USA Hockey. And so it's
Yeah.
not just a one-to-one thing. And so the other thing is, USHL is under the USA Hockey umbrella. I think there's a vested interest from USA Hockey to protect the USHL, which is one of the top rungs of the development ladder of their American development model. And so with that in mind, it doesn't make it just a seamless, you pay the expansion fee, you get in, that kind of thing. I think there's also, there would have to be remuneration to the USHL if teams were to leave. There are so many moving parts. There's nothing set in stone. But the fact of the matter is this was something that was kind of an open secret that's now really open with the OHL, because there was basically Muskegon welcomes the OHL was on the video board in their arena, and so it makes it a little harder to hide at that point. Not that I think they were really all that concerned about hiding it anyway.
Just a quick point to finish that up too is that like we're not going to see
Yes.
the national development program move to the OHL, right? Like that's just not going to happen. So if all of a sudden the OHL starts pilfering USHL teams, that's going to water down the competition for the program, which is the crown jewel of USA's hockey development model, right?
Right.
Yes, they get to play against college teams and they get to go play internationally together, the U18s and Five Nations and things like that. But they want to maintain a competitive balance for those U18 players to be playing against high end U20 USHLers. So yeah, to protect that crown jewel, you don't want to cut off an arm or a leg to protect it either. So I think it is going to be really difficult to get that done, but not to say it won't because money talks too.
Yeah, and I think everybody's going to have to get together, and there's going to have to be a conversation among all parties. But we'll get more into that soon. And I think the where the NTDP falls in this entire movement is really going to be something that we'll have to talk about much more in depth at another time. I'm fascinated by that as a a former employee there and having seen the inner workings. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts of that. All right, we're going to move on and just really quickly touch on the World Juniors. Next week and the week after, you will hear a lot more about the World Juniors. I promise you that. But I just want to say, Cam, your all snub team was so good that two of the all snub members are actually on the Canada selection camp roster. Zane Parekh added in place of Harrison Brunicki, who was injured, and then Beckett Seneca added after Easton Cowan was not able to participate. Still in camp, still an option for the team to be selected and likely to be selected as long as he's healthy. However, they said, you know what, this Beckett Seneca guy is kind of having a really good week. Maybe we should bring him in. And I mean, you called it out right away. Um, he had maybe one of the best, weeks you could have after not making the team.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes bullying works, right? Like, I feel like we help them. Like, I'm waiting for Seneca to send me a text or just a thank you text. But and he probably owes his teammates some love too. He's the one who banged up Cowan there in that last game, who opened up a chance for him to come. So a little tap to the boy in the room there too. The boys. No, I think it's great. I think Perek like we said last week, is that not only should he have been at camp, he should be running the top power play. And I still feel that way. So I don't think you bring him in to then cut him. I think you'd be like, okay, fine. Bernicki's not here. We'll bring Prek and we'll let him run and shelter him a little bit defensively and have him taking offensive zone minutes and running that PP. Seneca, that's going to be tougher for him to crack that club because
Yeah.
Cowan is going to play. He's going to be there. He's a lock on the team. We know that. I don't think the injury is that serious. But if Seneca can prove that he can play a two-way game, can you be a fourth line winger? Can you be a third line winger and play smart defensively and be responsible and then pop when you need to pop, right? Capitalize on your chances. So not to say that he doesn't have a chance to make this team. I think on a skill basis, he absolutely has a chance to make this team, but it's about fitting in those parts, right? And so now he's going to be tasked with playing a little bit out of his element where he gets to freewheel a lot more in Oshawa there. And so I'm rooting for the kid though. He's a great kid. He's a fun kid. And he's got loads and loads of skill that I think would help Canada, especially if an injury kicks off mid-tournament, right? There's your
Right.
guy on your fourth line. He can play on your first line wing, no problem. Put him up on your top PP. You need that kind of depth in the lineup.
Yeah, absolutely you do. And I think both have a chance still to make it here, and you can take 14. It's kind of up to you to how you want to structure it, but you can take 25 players this year, 3 goalies. You can say, okay, 8 and 14, you get 2 healthy
Mm-hmm.
scratches, you get guys. I think, you look at what Seneca has done. You saw the goal that he scored. How many goals have we seen where you actually go bar down and the puck hits the ice so hard it goes back up? That was one of the one of my favorite goals that I've seen in junior hockey this year. Also of note, Max Plant was added to Team USA's roster as a not as I don't believe there was any injury replacement. It's just he's on the roster now. Maybe they were trying to make sure he was healthy. Maybe they were waiting out for Will Smith for a little bit. And Plant had a great summer camp, so there's a chance. There's another guy that could potentially be late ad, gets it on the team. All right, we are now going to our segment Beyond Belief, which if you didn't catch it last time, basically the two of us are going to give each other a statement, and we'll both decide whether or not it is beyond belief or if it's an accurate statement. And so neither of us really have talked it out beforehand. Maybe we agree, Maybe we don't, but these will be some quick hitter conversational starters here in the prospect. Like we do these things all the time with as prospect guys, but this one was inspired by one of our segments from last week because we didn't really even mention this player. But Cam, I'm going to kick this one off. Michael Misa isn't getting enough buzz as the number one overall, as a potential number one overall.
I'm gonna say it's beyond belief. I'm gonna say that he
Okay.
is getting the appropriate amount of buzz as a potential first overall pick, because to be quite honest with you, I don't think he's in that echelon in the NHL scouts' minds that I'm speaking to. So I don't think it all. It's not like I got a phone line into all 32 clubs, but from the people I'm talking to, there's
Yeah.
a lot of question marks about whether or not he's a center in the NHL. And I know he's taken top 5 total faceoffs. He wins 55% of them. He's got speed. He goes hard to the net. But over and over again, I hear from some of these scouts, from these directors of amateur scouting, from these AGMs, people saying like we wonder about the details to his game, and the detail part of your game is pretty important when you're playing in the middle of the ice in the NHL, especially if you're looking to be a 1C. So I think his game, as we saw at the CHL USA Top Prospects game, translated very well over to the wing. He did take some shifts in the second game down the middle, and he did look good there too. I'm not saying he won't be a center. Personally, I lean a little bit to the side that he will be able to play center in the NHL. But just when you're looking at Hagens, I think is a locked-in center, and I think he's probably the most dynamic offensive guy in the draft. Porter Martone, big power forward. He's a winger. He will definitely be a winger, but he brings a unique element to the game that not a lot of players in this draft or any other players in this draft really have. And then Matt Schaefer has that true number one defenseman upside. And those three guys, just in the uniqueness and their skill set and their positions, even if Misa is a center, I think he falls third or fourth in line in that. And so for me, I think he's getting the appropriate amount of buzz for first overall.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't need to go any further than that. I feel the same way. And I think that the part of it is that, obviously the production this year is outstanding. He's leading the OHL with 55 points right now, and he's going to have a chance to build on that with some of these other guys out of, at the Canadian World Junior Camp. But, I think there's a reason why, Gavin McKenna, who's younger, is in Canada's camp and Michael Misa is not. And I think that, there's a lot of different things that come into play with that. It's hard to make the team. All I'll say is that Michael Misa has had a far better season than I anticipated he would have this year. He's put the work in. He's done the things necessary. And if he ends up as a
Absolutely.
top 5 pick instead of a number 1 guy, no worries. That's an amazing
fine.
accomplishment no matter what.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll leave the next one. I'll leave the next one to you, and I'll see if I can opine a little bit here.
All right, Chris. Okay. Andrew Cristall fails to make Team Canada. Is it beyond belief?
I think if you are on the outside looking in, it would be beyond belief, because you look at the point total and the different things that he's done this year and the incredible work ethic he had. And he also was very good in the summer camp, the summer showcase as well. He was one of their top, more reliable producers. However, when you look at the way that they built this camp, I think it's a real good chance that he's not there. I think it's a real good chance. And I know you say, well, this is Hockey Canada, just not taking the best team. They're and the fact of the matter is, when you look at their top 6, when you look at the guys that they have, when you look at the size options, when you look at the speed options, when you look at Gavin McKenna as a legitimate impact player on that roster, as good as Andrew Cristall is, as good as he has been offensively, he still leaves a little bit on the table when it comes to size, when it comes to the skating ability. There's a couple of things in how this team wants to play. You got guys that are a little more versatile than he is in that mix as well. And that's where things kind of go. Who's he competing with for these spots? Well, you got Matthew Wood, and you've got Carson Rakoff, and all these players that have been at the World Juniors before, have a significant size advantage and aren't giving away much offensively. So those are the types of things. So I think that statement, as shocking as it may be to the outside world, I mean, there was talk that I wasn't, before he went on a tear there, I wasn't even sure he was going to get invited to camp. He ends up getting there. So I'm going to say that one is an accurate statement posed by my co-host, Cam Robinson.
And
All
I'll just
right.
agree with everything you said.
Yeah. 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 This is going to, I promise everybody, we are going to argue at some point. All right. So this next one I think is going to be interesting, and I'll be interested to see if we have a little bit more. But this has become an increasingly touchy subject because we came into the season thinking one thing, and as the season has progressed, it has not gone the way that we thought. Anton Frendel is a top 10 prospect for this draft. We're not even talking top 5 anymore. We're talking top 10. Cam, is Anton Frendel is a top 10 prospect? Yes or no?
It's not even a top 15 prospect anymore.
Ooh. Ooh.
The
Okay.
board just
Okay.
came out. We
Please
got we got him
continue.
we got him 17. We got him 17 at EP right now, and I think that that is still giving credit to the pre-draft seasons and the hype that he showed. But there's so many things stacking against him. Like I haven't seen him play the middle of the ice this year. Have you?
No.
He's constantly injured. He hasn't been dynamic offensively. He has some nice two-way nuance to his game that I think will translate well for him. He's got the big one-timer, but I don't know if he's going to be a top power play guy that's going to be able to uncork that all the time in the NHL. I don't know if he's got the jam and the speed and the skill to play the middle of the ice and really be a true top 6 center. I think there's far more question marks with him than answers at this point, and the injuries are just continue to pile up and don't allow us to really get long looks at him for him to get his runway going. Now, maybe he ends up being one of these kids that's injured as a teenager and has a long, healthy career. And once he gets rolling, he ends up being as valuable as a top 10 pick. But I don't know a whole lot of teams that are itching to jump up there at 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 to pick this kid right now. So I'm saying that he is not in that realm at this moment.
Yeah, to me it's beyond belief that he has dipped as far as he has because I mean, I'll tell you what, coming out of last year's Five Nations, I don't know if you could have like he was the only player anybody wanted to talk about. I mean, he was dominant. He single-handedly took over games as an underager. He beat the US team in the final and just absolutely dominated that performance. And that sticks in your mind. And then he gets hurt and he can't play at the under 18 worlds. He has a fine showing, like in other tournaments and but nothing special. He's under a point per game when he's played in U20 games this year. But here's the thing, like I think about guys over the years, obviously we saw guys like Brad Lambert, Atu Ratu, other players that kind of had this hype going into the season, don't live up to it, fall back. And Atu Ratu has now played NHL games. He's not a number one prospect. He probably ended up drafted very close to where he should have been drafted. And I do think Frundell is tumbling, but when you see what is possible with the top of his game, it sucks you in. And I was a little sucked in by that. So, so
Didn't we get
it's
sucked in with Vasily Podkolzin at a Halenka one time too? Didn't we get sucked into that?
yes. Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah. That's like,
Right.
that's, I
It
mean,
happens,
I
right? We
think that
gotta we
lasted an
can't we can't
entire
anchor
season.
point.
Yeah.
Right?
That
We can't
lasted an
anchor to those
entire season.
performances.
No,
Yeah.
you
And
can't.
and
You
this
can't.
one,
You want to believe that they
it's
can
tough.
do that, but you can't stick to it. All right. Last one on our Beyond Belief segment. I leave to you, my friend.
Ivan Ryapkin is no longer a first round prospect.
I'm I'm gonna say it's beyond belief only for one reason because I think he has not played very well. This draft isn't very good. And
Hmm.
that's where I'm saying that's another player where we look at what happened last season. We look at the totality of the body of work. This year has been a disaster. And quite frankly, I know, Muskegon tried to get him out of Russia. It hasn't happened. He's I feel like there's a lot of different factors at play here. But there are questions about conditioning. There are questions about kind of, attitude, different things like that, that we really, it's all rumor and innuendo for the most part, because it's what you see. But I am not convinced that a talent of his caliber can't still go in the first round when we are struggling really. Like, I know you guys put your latest rankings together. I've been having a hard time finding 32 players that I feel are legitimate first round draft prospects in this draft, which is why I feel like Ryabkin still has an opportunity to go in the first round. So I'll say beyond belief, but I would like to hear your answer as well.
I'm gonna say that it's a true statement, but I do give a lot of credit to that point, is that it is true. Once you get into like the early 20s, you're like, oh boy, like I'm putting players down that if I'm the GM, I'm not loving walking up on stage and
Right.
drafting this kid in the first round. So in that sense, maybe you do roll the dice on a kid with his talent. But I mean, the production has been awful. Like you said, it's not even really like innuendo. It's his coach like coming out and saying it. Like this kid's like
That's
expected.
true.
He thought he
That's
was going
true.
to just walk onto the KHL team and he didn't because he wasn't physically ready to do it conditioning wise either. And so now he's kind of pouting and he's not playing in the V very well. And when he does, he's not showing up and he's not producing in the MHL. And like from what I'm seeing, I'm like, I am not impressed. And so if a player is just struggling, but they're still giving it their all and they're digging in, then I'm like, all right, well, maybe he can work his way out of this. And we've seen some good stuff. But when you're not even working to get out of it, my patience for you goes way down very, very quickly. And I know that clubs feel the same way too. And unfortunately, you slap on the Russian factor with that too, and that is not going to help his draft stock. So all it takes is one team to roll the dice on a player when they're looking at this guy and being like, am I going to draft a likely third liner at 25, or am I going to take a swing on this Russian kid who we have seen flash, and maybe it busts out for us, but maybe he ends up being a top sixer. So for me, I think that he's outside of the first round. He is on my personal board too. So I'll say it's a true statement.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I think those are all very valid points, and I think for me, it's like you're only in by a whisker, So, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's interesting. All right. Well, we're going to talk a little bit now. Every week, we like to check in with the AHL. You of course can watch the AHL on FloHockey every week. We have every single game is on our platform, and it's a lot of fun. And so, this week we're going to focus on the U22 scorers in the league. And we're going to get a graphic up that, of course, if you go on Elite Prospects, which Cam so proudly represents on our show, you can use the filters on the stat page. It is one of the most useful tools that I have. This here at what you're seeing on your screen, and if you're at home, we'll also read a little bit for you so that you aren't left out. If you're listening, is the top U22 scorers in the AHL right now. And as of right now, in terms of total points, Luca Del Bel Belluz of the Cleveland Monsters is number one with 26 points in 23 games. Frank Nazar of the Rockford IceHawks, Chicago Blackhawks affiliate, 24 points in 21 games. Defenseman Denton Mateychuk, who has been outstanding this year for the Cleveland Monsters, 22 points in 23 games. And that is your number one defenseman. Also, one other player on this list, you go further down, he's 18th in total points, but he's a point per game player, is Jonathan Lekaramaki from the Abbotsford Canucks, of course, the first round draft pick of the Vancouver Canucks. And you've been watching, Cam, Vancouver, you're Vancouver based. Certainly you've seen the growth of Lekaramaki. I mean, this has been, he's in the AHL. The one thing I will say, a lot of power play goals, a lot of, kind of that, but I think we're starting to see a little bit more of what he's fully capable of in North American pro hockey. I mean, what have you seen from him this year?
Yeah, absolutely. And the change really happened last year when we were in Gothenburg, for the World Juniors. Is that
Yeah.
I had been a pretty vocal critic of his game, being like, it's perimeter, it's a little soft. His release is all world, but he needs to get the space to get it off. He needs other people to do the dirty work for him. And then all of a sudden at the World Juniors last year, yeah, he had mono and it lasted way longer than many people expected it to, and that really took the wind out of his sails. But at the WJC there, he was tremendous. He was driving the middle. He was forechecking. He was getting to the net front and eating cross checks. And I was like, okay, this is what you want to see. And that's just carried along with him throughout the back half of his season there in Sweden, and then coming over to the AHL this year. He is a shooter. He is a finisher, and that kind of unique goal scoring ability that he is going to score 30 goals in the NHL, and that's just how it's going to be. 10 goals in 14 games right now in the A. He's had a cup of coffee with the Canucks already. I think that he'll get some more looks up there too. But it's been very, very impressive. I think that the evolution to his game and kind of the added jam, like you said, we'd like to see some more 5-on-5 goals from him before he can really lock him in there. But I think purely from an offensive side of things, with space on the ice, especially on the power play, or playing with like a high end playmaker, kid's good. He's gonna put up numbers.
Yeah, he's definitely an offensive force, and I think that's going to be fun to watch. I mean, I think if you're a Columbus Blue Jackets fan, you love seeing a couple of Blue Jackets prospects up towards the top of this list as well. Luca Del Bell's has been a revelation this year. 15 goals in 23 games. 1.13 points per game. And then Denton Mateychuk, who I mentioned, he's been the AHL Player of the Week already this year. He's been one of the best young defensemen. You think about the fact that Columbus moved on from David Jiricek. I think they were a little bit more comfortable to do that because they had Mateychuk. And I thought that draft, when they got both Jiricek and Mateychuk, I thought that was out. I thought they were going to be, superstars together for a long time there. Obviously, now Jiricek has moved on to Minnesota, and we're going to talk about him in our next segment because there's a fascinating question I have to pose to my co-host here, and we're going to go back and forth on it a little bit. But this is, the U22 players. I think the younger players in the AHL, if you can get those guys to contribute, your teams are going to have more success. I think Cleveland's one of those teams right now. Laval has had a great season. They've got Owen Beck and Joshua Waugh being real drivers of their offensive attack. So we're starting to see some more of these players really make an impact. So that is just a reminder. You can watch the AHL every single night. Basically, I mean, they don't play every single night, but most nights you'll be able to watch AHL hockey on FloHockey.tv. So make sure you are subscribed for that today. All right. We like to end every show with a question. Some of them are going to be bigger, some of them are going to be tricky. Some of them are going to be kind of in the moment. And this is one of those that is in the moment. This is in the news right now. David Jiricek was traded to the Minnesota Wild. He's now back in the AHL. Simon Nemec was the number 2 pick in that draft that year. He is now in the AHL as well with the Utica Comets. There was a lot of debate between those two players as being the top 2 defensemen. Who's going to go first? But now we have to kind of recalibrate because I think now they may not be the best defenseman in their draft class. Although a lot of the defensemen in that class are in the AHL. Also, keep in mind, Lane Hudson was a second round draft pick currently in the NHL. So lots of things happening there. So, Cam, what I'm going to put as the question to the two of us: Simon Nemec, David Jiricek, top 2 defensemen selected in the 2022 NHL draft. Both are currently in the AHL trying to find their way. You have a choice. Which one of those two is most likely to put it together and become an NHL top 4 defenseman? And if you have to say neither, that could be very troubling. But but of those two, who do you think has the best chance to make it?
God, hey, it during that year, I think I was on an island at Elite Prospects where I was like, Simon Nemec. I like this kid a lot. The skating, I really like the skating. I like the IQ. I didn't think he had like super high offensive upside, but I just thought he was going to be a good player. And I still think he's going to be a good player. It hasn't happened just yet, and he has struggled to move the puck effectively at the NHL and the AHL level at times too. Jiricek,
Yeah.
though, never loved the feet. He had the size. They're both right shot kids, but Jiricek had the size. He had higher offensive upside with big shot, and I think just better handling. But he has his development has stagnated more than Nemec, and the foot speed. The foot speed has always bothered me with him. Now, that said, I do like him moving to Minnesota because I like some of their player development. I like some of their pro scouts. I understand what they're doing. They're bringing him in. They got Zebuyam, they got Brock Faber. They can insulate him a little bit. Maybe that's with Jared Spurgeon or Brodin. Nemec, he's fighting against Luke Hughes and Dougie Hamilton. I'm going Nemec. I'm going to stick with the guy that brought me to the dance there in 2022, and I'm going Simon Nemec has the better shot because I'm all about skating and brains. And so that he's got the edge in both those categories.
Yeah. Okay. So I was Team Jiricek in his draft year. And you know, in the subsequent years, I go back to the Halifax World Juniors and I watch how David Jiricek played in that tournament. He was the defenseman of the tournament. He was a
Mm-hmm.
force, and he almost took the Czechs to gold against Connor Bedard and your home country of Canada. And that was one of the most impressive performances. He's actually there. David Spacek who is also on that team and also excellent in that tournament, is also with the Iowa Wild right now. So they are reunited there.
Mm.
But
Oh,
the thing that gives me concern about Jiricek at this point is that he wanted too much too soon. He wasn't ready for the NHL, and he didn't earn that
yeah.
opportunity. And when it didn't come, he asked for a trade. And it's very difficult for me. Now, I like the player still. It is very difficult for me to reconcile that as I just knock my microphone with my hat. It is very difficult for me to reconcile that with, can you bear down and figure it out and get to the NHL? That said, I think in terms of physical tools, I think in terms of the way the NHL can be played, even with somebody with his foot speed, as I agree that skating is a problem right now, I still think that there's a potential for him to reach into that. I think the size factor, the strength, the different things that he can do. I feel like there's a little bit more versatility with him. I also think it'll be
Hmm.
interesting to see where Nemec ends up because, as you mentioned, he's competing with all of those guys in those spots. You've got, Anton Salayev is coming up in the future as
Seamus
well. You have
Casey.
all these, yeah, Shane,
Yeah.
you've got all these different players. Like the fact that Seamus Casey, in his brief stint in the NHL, looked better than most. Nemec had some good looks last year. Like he had some, like
Yeah.
it just isn't working this year. The other thing I'll say to all of our listeners is that development is not a straight line, and the fact that these guys are back in the
Mhm.
AHL is not a problem. It's not something that is going to. It, I mean, it can be if it continues to kind of go down this difficult path, but you look at the way that they're playing right now. I still believe that there is a lot of potential in both of those players. I still think especially now that he's in this new situation, he'll be insulated by guys like Brock Faber. You'll have a more offensive style guy in Z Bouillon coming up. I like the
Yeah.
fit for Jiricek better than
Mhm.
I do for Nemec at this point. So that is why
I
I
agree.
will I will go David Jiricek. And that is, hey, I mean, you know, I like this cordial back and forth that we're having. One day we're just gonna have it out. I swear, it's coming.
Gloves off.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but you know what? It's first of all, Cam, I want to say thanks for bringing the festive environment. I wish that I got the memo. Maybe I'll do it next week, and I'll put
There
an
we go.
entire reindeer behind me or something. We'll figure it out. But yeah, but this has been fun. 2 episodes in, and boy, I'm excited. We both are going to be back with some more regular sized episodes, and then we've got our big World Junior preview coming up the week of Christmas. So we will get that to you guys there. Cam, anything? What's coming up on Elite Prospects as you guys get geared up for the World Juniors here?
Yeah, whole bunch, right? Like we mentioned earlier, our draft rankings just came out yesterday, but now it's all geared towards World Juniors. So we'll have our team by team previews. We'll have the tournament previews. So the meet the teams. Those are always really interesting and fun to write, and for people to look into and kind of familiarize themselves heading into the event. And then just as things come flying at us, NCAA, CHL stuff, we'll be having our finger on the pulse of everything moving forward here. This is one of the best, right? This next stretch here, this next
Oh
month
yeah.
is some of the best hockey out there too, right? We live for this stuff.
This is the best time of year. I mean, it's not just Christmas; it's the World Juniors, it's everything else. We love doing it. And Cam, it's been fun so far. I can't wait to keep this going. I want to let everybody know on FloHockey, we will have a number of video features coming out. James Hagens is already out. Trey Augustine coming up, Z Bouillon on the way. So we've got a lot of features on video features on these players that you will be seeing representing Team USA at the World Junior Championship. We'll also be doing a lot more analysis in terms of the roster, previewing the selection camp and things of that nature. Make sure you guys are subscribed to FloHockey.tv. You can get a lot of different great things on there, like the AHL, the ECHL, the USHL, and such. Make sure you're checking out Elite Prospects. It's a great resource, especially during World Junior, to see where everybody is at and what they're doing and how these teams are performing and everything else. So great resource there. And don't forget, subscribe, rate, review this podcast. Watch us on YouTube. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the YouTube page. Check out Elite Prospects and FloHockey's social media channels where you will see clips from this show throughout the week. So it has been a lot of fun. Cam, I hope that you have a great week here. Can't wait to do it again soon and start really diving in on the World Juniors. So I hope you have a good week, buddy.
Yeah, you too, pal. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, everybody. That is it for Called Up the Prospects podcast. We'll be back next week talking lots of World Juniors. We'll see y'all real soon right here on Called Up the Prospects podcast.
Nailed it. Look at it, eh?
Take care
Okay.
of that family of yours, buddy.
Appreciate it, bud.
We'll
We'll talk to you soon.
yeah, we'll talk soon.